For one last time, I've got a 7-round mock draft for the Cleveland Browns with trades because I think Andrew Berry is going to make some moves in this year's draft. Now, quick self-plug before we look at the picks I have the Browns making. Make sure to tune in for our Day 2 draft coverage here. We'll be live on the channel, and I want to get a quick head count. So type me in the comment section below if you'll be able to tune in for our live draft coverage. Now, quick refresher. Here are the picks the Browns are working with. They've got 6 picks altogether, a second, a third. Those are the only 2 picks in the top 150. I think the Browns are going to look to change that, which is why I'm about to lead into the first trade I'm making here. But a 5th, a 6th, and 2 7s. So with that all being said, I am going to do my best to look at this through the lens of Andrew Berry and not what I would do because I'm not the one in charge. And I think the Browns are going to look to acquire more draft capital. So here's a trade idea I have here, and I think it has some legs to it. The Cardinals go from 66 to 54. I could see Arizona, which, by the way, has 11 picks in this draft, the most of any team. They're tied with a few other spots as well, consolidating some of their picks, going, listen, we've got a lot of picks. Now let's try and get some quality picks. So they'll give up one of their 5th-round picks and a future third, which, to be honest with you, I'd rather have an extra 3rd-round pick next year than 2 3rd-round picks this year because the Browns don't need to fill a lot of roster holes this year, and it's not like this draft is insanely deep at position groups. So I like this deal for both ends. The Cardinals can go get a more surefire thing at 54 than 66. The Browns can get an extra draft pick and pick up a future 3rd-rounder in the process. So after making this trade with the Cardinals and moving back to 66, I think the Browns would go running back out of Tennessee, Jaylen Wright. Really tossed and turned with this one. Handful of directions they can go, but I ultimately think at this spot, running back could provide the biggest impact for 2024 compared to any other position group, and the Browns are looking to maximize 2024. So here's the background on Jaylen Wright. 5'11", 210 pounds, so he's not just some scat back. Don't fall to the trap of, oh, he wasn't a lead workhorse back at Tennessee. That means he's not an every down back. I think he has that potential in the NFL down the road. He's also one of the fastest just overall players in this draft. He ran a sub-4 40-yard dash. He led Tennessee in rushing the last 2 years. He was a home run machine for them, averaged 6.6 yards per carry. Now, as a Tennessee grad, I watched every single snap of Tennessee football the last 2 years plus, and I'll tell you what, Jaylen Wright is a home run just waiting to happen. Now, there are some elements about his game that I don't know are going to translate super well to the pros. He did have 4 fumbles in 2022. The concepts and just the overall play calling at Tennessee, it's very high tempo, high paced offense, and that allows for a Volunteers offense to get off a lot of quick plays and tire down a defense. There's not going to be that same high tempo in the NFL, though. Now, he also wasn't used super often. Only 137 carries last year as Tennessee had a 3-headed monster backfield going. But when he was used, 7.4 yards a carry and 4 total touchdowns. He was not their premier goal line back. So when they got in the red zone, they didn't usually use Jaylen Wright. I'd be willing to wager that of his 4 touchdowns, 3 of them came from 50-plus yards out. Now, I do want to share a stat that we've looked at before on the channel, but if you're just tuning in, this just is a good way to remind you all that looking at stats is not a fair way to compare prospects. Jaylen Wright versus Blake Corum. Blake Corum has more yards. He's got more touchdowns. Isn't Blake Corum better in every single aspect possible? When you take a deeper look at it, Blake Corum got over 100 more carries than Jaylen Wright. Despite that, he only had 1 more rush of 10-plus yards. Look at the breakaway percentage. Jaylen Wright over half the time, 12 points higher than Blake Corum. Yards after contact, Blake Corum, sure, had more carries, more yards, but by average, it favors Jaylen Wright, which means if you put these 2 players in the same offense and gave them the same amount of carries, Jaylen Wright would outperform Blake Corum in my eyes. Running back at the end of the day is the most impactful pick that the Browns can make with their first selection in the draft. No idea. No one has any idea what the Browns are going to do because they don't know what they're going to do. They have to wait and see who's even available for them. But I think if a running back is there and you look at the running back room, if they want to get a better insurance policy, than Deontay Foreman for however long Nick Chubb is out for to start the year, Jaylen Wright can provide some good impact plays for 2024 and beyond. I do think he is a special running back, and we're not just looking at it because of one season until Nick Chubb returns. So would you draft a running back first? A handful of positions the Browns can go after. The word on the street is the trenches, but I think that if the Browns have an opportunity to get a playmaker like Wright, they may go that direction. Then at pick 85, I'm going to go with Mizzou's left tackle, Javon Foster. Now, I just said that the Browns are going to go in the trenches, and I think they wait until their second, third round selection to do so. And they find a guy with loads of experience at one position specifically, left tackle. Will the Browns learn from their mistake of you can't just draft a right tackle and expect to move him to the left side of the offensive line and expect it to go no problem, smooth as a whistle? No. That's what they tried to do with Jed Wills. I think if Jed Wills ends up leaving in free agency next year and signs elsewhere, his next team might move him back to right tackle, and he may have a really good career there. But for the Browns, I think if they do look to add a potential replacement for Wills, they're going to want to make sure this guy's got experience at left tackle. And Javon Foster has plenty of experience. Two-time team captain, 2023 third-team AP All-American, first-team All-SEC, and 39 starts at left tackle to me signals this is a player that the Browns could identify as a Jed Wills replacement. And I also think if you're like a little bit of an amateur when it comes to the draft, if you want to sound smart in front of your friends, when you get past like the first two rounds of the draft, teams are not looking at what their needs are for just this year. They're looking at their needs for next year, okay? Here are the Browns' 2025 free agent starters. I mean, Nick Chubb, Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper, Jed Wills, J.O.K., Greg Newsome with an asterisk. If they pick up his fifth-year option, then he's not a free agent. So if they're looking ahead here, Jed Wills could be someone they try to find a replacement for in this year's draft. Have Foster sit on the bench for a year, practice, go up against Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett for a year and practice and feel like, yeah, he probably got as many game reps as he did there than he would against some other teams in the NFL. So they'll feel confident with Foster starting for them in 2025 if it gets to that point. Or he can just kind of blossom into a James Hudson replacement, a swing tackle that if an injury pops up, you like your chances of him filling in for a half or a game. Now, before we get to the rest of my mock draft, I do want to shout out our sponsor today, which is Game Time. If you want to go catch a Guardians game, a playoff basketball or hockey game, or any other local sporting event or concert in your area, download Game Time today because they're going to have the best deals for the last-minute tickets. Now, you're also going to get $20 off your first purchase on Game Time when you download the app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS. Now, what I love about Game Time the most is that you can do an all-in price option right from your homepage. That way you don't spend 20 minutes looking for tickets and you're like, well, I didn't realize the price would double when I got to the checkout portion of the process. But with Game Time, you don't have to waste your time that way. So download the app and use that code CHATSPORTS, CHAT Sports, for $20 off your first purchase. I put all that information in the comments and description of today's video because I love you all, and I know you all did not remember that. So download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets for the lowest price guaranteed. Moving on to round number 5, where I go best player available. And I think that's something Andrew Berry has shown he does not mind doing. And I took Notre Dame cornerback Cam Hart. Do the Browns need a cornerback? Not really. But I think Cam Hart in round number 5 is just too good a value to pass on. And I was very surprised to see him fall all this way. He's 6'3", 202 pounds, and he ran a 4.5 40-yard dash. He's not the fastest cornerback in this draft class, but with a 6'3" wingspan, he doesn't have to be. He just has to be in the right zip code of his man, and he can get a hand to the football. He was a 3-year starter in a man-heavy defense, so he has been battle-tested, and he's not just some run-stopping tackler that just needs to sit in his zone. He can go step for step with guys. Now, when you look at his stats, I think the reason why he's not going higher is because of the lack of production, like no interceptions. There are people who are just simply that lazy that go, no picks, no thank you. picks are tough to come by. And I mean that in like a realistic way and a metaphorical way. Like sometimes a receiver tips the ball and it falls to you. Sometimes the receiver catches the ball and you don't get the interception. So for Cam Hart, I think other teams are going to look past him because he doesn't have the major explosive playmaking abilities on his college tape. But you know who else didn't? Martin Emerson. And Martin Emerson didn't have a pick in his first year in the NFL. And then he had 4 last year. So I'm willing to wager that the Browns are okay with looking past interception production at the collegiate level for a 6'3", 4'5", 40-yard dash corner. Now the question becomes, do the Browns pick up Greg Newsome's 5th-year option? If they think that he is a long-term play for them, then I can see them doing this. But if they feel like $13 million is a little bit too rich and they'd rather just play it out for the final year of his initial 4-year contract and go from there, then maybe they decide, let's draft a cornerback now. That way we already have a head start on a potential replacement if Greg Newsome does play his final season in Cleveland in 2024. Newsome the last few seasons has shown us some improvement. Last year especially, right? First time getting interception, pick 6 against the Ravens. But I do think that the Browns may not be 100% sold that Newsome is a guy they want to invest in long term. My gut feeling is they'll pick up his 5th-year option because $13 million isn't an egregious price. But they may have some second thoughts if they get a guy they really like in the draft and think, ooh, or we can start this guy next year and save $11 million. Just something to think about. On to round number 5, pick 162. I'm going to go with Kentucky's linebacker, Trevin Wallace. I'm not proud that I waited this long to get a linebacker, but this linebacker draft class is not very good, so I didn't want to reach on one. And I think Wallace in round 5 is a really solid pick, all things considered. 6'1", 227 pounds, and he ran a pretty strong 4.51 40-yard dash. I mean, keep in mind what we just saw Cam Hart run. We're looking at a linebacker who's not very much far behind him. He's got great physical traits and production. Now, the con is very raw product. I think he needs a lot of coaching from Jim Schwartz, and that's perfectly fine because the Browns can afford to take a linebacker that needs to have a good coaching staff around him to build him up. Now, production-wise, he had some good plays last year for Big Blue Nation. 8.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. He is a physical traits guy. He just needs a lot of sandpaper. He needs a lot of coaching. He needs to have some rough edges smoothed out. And I think the Browns are willing to bet on Jim Schwartz and his staff and Mike Vrabel to get the best out of Trevin Wallace. Now, when you look at the linebacker rankings, this is from Mel Kiper. I as much as I would love to see Edgerrin Cooper be the pick for the Browns in round number 2, there's just been little to none chatter that the Browns are going linebacker. And maybe that's a good thing because there was very little chatter they would go cornerback. Then they took Martin Emerson. Not a lot of chatter they go wide receiver. Then they went Cedric Tillman. So maybe that's just the way the Browns prefer to operate, but there hasn't been a whole lot of chatter about it, and for that reason, I'm not holding my breath on them going linebacker early. Now, we do have a couple of 7th-round picks here, but I'm going to make a trade with the New Orleans Saints and jump up from 206 to 199 and give the Saints 2 7th-round picks because the Browns hate 7th-round picks. And then with pick 199 in a 5-man draft class, I have the Browns selecting Illinois tight end Tip Reiman. So let's get to know the Fighting Illini for a moment here. He's 6'4", 271 pounds, 22 years old, married, and has an RAS score of 9.9. This is an Andrew Berry man made in a lab. He's young and he's athletic, and that's what Berry's biggest criteria are when drafting. Now, the pro I've got for him is when we're talking round 3 guy or day 3 guys, I need players that can contribute on special teams. I don't care how great of a backup tight end you are in the first year of your NFL career. You're not going to see the field a lot on the offensive side of the field. But you could see it on special teams. And that's something Reiman has loads of experience in. Now, the con is very little production when it comes to receiving. 420 career receiving yards, nice. 5 touchdowns. He was a preferred walk-on for the Fighting Illini under the Lovie Smith regime Then Brett Bielema comes in there. Easily could have just said, dude, hit the portal and get out of here. You're not even one of the previous regime's highly recruited players. Instead, he gets a scholarship in his second season in Urbana-Champaign. And I think the Browns' tight end room should not feel comfortable as is. I would like to see an addition made in the tight end room because you are one injury away from David Njoku, and then it's just Jordan Akins and Giovanni Ricci and Zaire Mitchell-Payton leading the charge at the tight end position. So I think it'd be advantageous for the Browns to add some more depth in this position. So grade my final mock draft for me, A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know what grade you're going to give it in the comment section. I'd give it a B. I don't think you can get an A when you don't pick until 60 whatever we took Jaylen Wright at. But I do like the Jaylen Wright selection. I think we did a good job of finding Javon Foster to be a potential replacement for Jed Wills. I give it a B to B minus. I don't think it's going to be the best draft for any team in the NFL, but when you're the last one to pick, it's hard to have the best draft. So with that all being said, I do want to run through my own first-round mock draft with you guys here. Just kind of want to get it on record. I think that what's going to happen on Thursday. So no surprise here. Pick number 1, Caleb Williams from USC. Jaden Daniels from LSU goes to the Commanders. Number 3 is Drake May to the Patriots. I think New England stays put and goes quarterback. The Vikings go J.J. McCarthy in a trade-up with the Arizona Cardinals, who then themselves trade back into the top 5 to get Marvin Harrison in a deal with the Chargers. Giants stay put and go Malik Neighbors. Titans and Falcons go chalk. The Bears are back on the clock at 9. They give Caleb Williams someone to throw to in Rome Odunze. Aaron Rodgers has a new target with Brock Bowers. Remember the Vikings trade back? Well, they acquired the 11th pick from the Vikings, and then they get the guy that they were going to take at 5 all along in Olu Fashanu and still have an additional first-round pick later on. I think the Rams are going to look to trade up and get the Georgia tackle, Amarius Mims. He hasn't started more than 10 games in his collegiate career, but he's got a wingspan of Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I think on the traits alone, Sean McVay may pound the table to move up and get him. I've got the Raiders going defense with Quinyon Mitchell. I've got the Saints going offensive tackle. I think the Colts go defense with Terrion Arnold. Byron Murphy, I don't think is going to go top 10 like some people think he will. Sub 300 pounds, 1-year starter. I think Seahawks at 16 is a great spot for him. I think the Jags give Trevor Lawrence a Calvin Ridley replacement with Brian Thomas. The Bengals look to replace DJ Reader with Jazon Newton, I think the best defensive tackle in this draft class. Denver moves back with the Rams in that Mims trade, and they go edge rusher at 19 with Leatu Latu. I think the Steelers just stay put, and they go with the best remaining offensive lineman, Troy Fontenot. I think the Dolphins try and find a replacement for all the pass rushers they lost in free agency by getting Jared Verse. Eagles, I wanted to see trade up, but ultimately I've got them staying at 22 and going with Cooper DeJean. Remember the Chargers made all those trades? They're back on the clock at 23. They go Kool-Aid McKinstry to shore up that DB room. The Cowboys at 24, they lost some offensive linemen in the offseason. How about they replace them with a versatile pick like Graham Barton? The Packers at 25, they moved down from David Bakhtiari. They need a replacement. J.C. Latham is that option for them. The Bucs need to find a new center for Baker Mayfield. I like Jackson Powers Johnson. I have the Chiefs jumping ahead of the Bills so that Buffalo can't get A.D. Mitchell, and Kansas City and the Cardinals strike a deal that sends Mitchell to the Chiefs, and then the Bills go with the speedster Xavier Worthy. I think the Lions look to add another DB in Nate Wiggins. I've got the Rams going with Ladd McConkey, especially with McConkey's old offensive coordinator from Georgia, now the OC at Baltimore, in Todd Monken. The 49ers, they go offensive line. That's really their only need. So they take Jordan Morgan from Arizona. And then finally, the Cardinals are on the clock at 32 after swapping picks with the Chiefs at 27. And they look to give Kyler Murray a new center because their center is old Browns guard Yelda Froholt. And they go with Zach Frazier from West Virginia. End scene. That is my 2024 first-round mock draft. I can't wait to see how bad it does.
Job well done.
Thank you. Do you want to pick a card?
I would love to pick a card.
What do you want to go with?
I'm going to go, I feel like we haven't had a face card in a while. I'm going to go King.
It has been a while, you're right.
King of Spades.
I'm going to go Jack of Clubs because of that. Okay. The face cards do not pop up a lot.
They don't.
You ready? It's a face card. It's the Queen of Spades. We were in between. Sandwiched. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed our mock draft, and I'll see you all soon for the NFL draft.